Okay, I think we can
Yeah.
go ahead. Okay,
Sugidama blog. Sugidama blog.
hey everyone, welcome to episode 44 of Sugidama Podcast, the podcast about Japanese sake, the drink that is a product of not only the ingredients it's made from, like rice, water, koji, and yeast, but also the history of the area, the culture, the philosophy of the brewers, and the local community. And today, we are going to talk about an amazing book called Discovering Yamaguchi Sake by Rion, the book that puts a great focus on the idea that any particular sake is a sum of so many influences, so many components, if you like, which makes the drink a fascinating subject. But before I introduce my guest properly, let me tell you about our sponsor, London Sake, who has one of the widest selections of premium and craft sake available online today. You can choose from over 100 sake from 25 breweries, and they will deliver across the UK and many European markets. And if you don't know what sake to choose, you can use simple online tasting notes together with very sensible and affordable food pairings to help you decide. What's more, you can get a 10% discount by just using the code SUGIDAMA, all caps, during checkout. London Sake, making sake simple. My name is Alex, and I live in London. I am certified sake specialist, sake judge, sake educator, and sake advocate. Besides this podcast, I have Sugidama blog, where I write about all things sake and publish tasting notes, overviews, and information about sake events happening in London. I think I mentioned Jim's book for the first time last summer in the intro to the episode featuring him and Andrew Russell, his co-host, in the super nerdy but very, very interesting podcast, Sake Deep Dive. And now the book is out, and you can order it from many places. I will put the links in the show notes, but you can just search for it on the internet, if you like, and find a shop which sells it near you. Again, it's called Discovering Yamaguchi Sake, and it's a fantastic book, a pure joy to read. As I said, Jim has been on Sugidama podcast before, and if you haven't listened to it yet, it's episode 35. In this episode, he talks a bit about his background, so in our conversation with him, we got straight to the book. Oh, the funny thing is that we recorded this interview on Saturday morning in London and evening in Yamaguchi, where Jim lives. And the recording was plagued with various technical hiccups. First, my microphone didn't seem to work until I noticed that I didn't plug it in. And then at the end of our conversation, we almost lost the track of Jim's side of the recording. It took me a few hours to get in touch with the service I used to record remote interviews, and they managed to recover it for me. So thanks a lot. All is well that ends well, so let's start.
Please welcome our guest.
Hi Jim, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Alex. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, it's great to hear you again. It's a second time on Sugidama podcast, and it's a big news. So
yeah, it's
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So how do you feel?
It feels very, very different to be here, sort of on my own, with sort of it's a kind of, I guess, tooting my own horn. But yeah.
Yeah. I guess you're doing quite a lot of interviews and podcasts at the moment, which is part of the package, I guess, when you publish the book.
It is a new thing. It is, I guess, it is a very small publisher, and so they don't really have a promotional budget. So they have asked lots and lots and lots of different people, and they've asking me to do lots of stuff, and I'm actually really happy to do podcast. I'm happy to be on Sugidama again, and
Thank
it's
you.
good because it's part of the community. It's part of that sort of circle of people that I already feel part of. So it's much more comfortable than just talking to random strangers, which I guess I'm going to have to do at some point.
Yeah, yeah. Wait until you be signing your book at the bookstore, and people will coming and asking you questions, and you have
Yeah,
no idea who they are. Yeah.
no idea whether. Yeah, it's very very nerve wracking just the thought of it. So
Great. So, again, you've been to Sugidama podcast.
mhm.
We talked about your background, your story, how you found yourself in Yamaguchi, and how
Yeah.
you got into sake. So we'll leave it. And you also probably talked about it on other interviews. So
Mhm.
let's get straight to the book. So
Sure. Thank you.
how? Yeah. So the idea of the book. How did you come up with the idea of the book?
So the idea of the book uh, was really just me wanting to tell all of these stories. Like I've been wanting more people to know about all of these great breweries in Yamaguchi, and I've wanted to just to get as much attention on it as I could on this place, on this community, on all of them, these people. And I started out just doing it, place by place, piece by piece, introducing them one by one on these different articles and different websites and stuff. And I got to the point where I realized that would just take forever, just and I would
Hmm.
never be able to get to everything. And so um, I thought I'd just put it together, all make it all one thing. And I really wanted I wanted to. So when you're introducing breweries one by one, it's all very very isolated. But I really feel like that's the wrong way to approach this kind of thing because no one makes sake in isolation. No brewery is just in the middle of nothing. There are all of these other things going on, these other connections, these other sort of elements at play, and I wanted to present as whole a picture as I could of what it is that stands behind the sake that we drink, and this is my attempt at doing that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that because when I read your book, I think I enjoy reading it very much,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
and the thing about the book is that on the cover it looks like a travel book, like a travel book. Go to Yamaguchi's prefecture, and if you want to tour breweries, this is a book. But under the cover, it's very multi-layered story. You talk about Yamaguchi Prefecture, about geography, about history. You talk about history of Japan. You talk about all these places where breweries are located, some history behind that,
Mhm.
and you talk about at the beginning you provide the dictionary of brewing terms,
Yeah.
but then during the book you drop here and there some other terms, some other techniques, how sake is made, and on top of that you talk about actual people who behind that. It's not talking about sake, but it's talking about how they think, what they think, and what um, they're interested by, and it makes it. When people talk about sake and they say, "Oh yeah, it's a great sake. It's a lot of depth, and there is some acidity, some
Hmm.
sweetness, and things like that." But it's all so well integrated that it's a joy to drink. So
Hmm.
it's the same about your book. Everything is so well integrated that you read the book and it's interesting, because in travel books you tend to read only about things you want to visit, for example. But in this case, you read the full book, and it makes you thinking, okay, what next? What these people think? What in this region, what they do, and it's also there is you also yourself, you come through the book as well with some of the things you like, you don't like, and I think it's in this regard, it's amazing book because on the cover it's one thing, but in reality it's much more.
That's really gratifying to hear.
I think because obviously when you think about sake, and they have been published a number of books in recent few years about sake, and you think, okay, what's next? And here's what should be next. I think it's you probably hit the sweet spot of sake books and travel books, and I think for me it's one of the most interesting part is obviously people who behind this. And you conveyed all these feelings there, some kind of insecurity sometimes, very well, because we'll talk about it later. But it's a great thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's the process where I wasn't sure at the start how to package it. When I say package it, like, I had these stories that I wanted to tell, and I very much wanted to start with the history, because, like I said, like in the book, it didn't just happen out of nothing, out of nowhere. The history, things that seem completely unconnected and unimportant to sake played a very important role in all of it. And so you can't, just pick and choose which parts go in. So I wanted to put it all together, but then to get it to be something that people would actually read and would find interesting required a lot of sort of tweaking and sort of reconfiguring. And obviously the publisher had their own ideas about it. And sort of that idea of it being a travel book, it's like, I wanted to make it something that, if successful, people would want to visit Yamaguchi. That, I do want that effect. But it didn't start at like, I'm going to make a travel book for Yamaguchi, because, that wasn't the story that I wanted to tell. But then, the publisher also had ideas like, all right, if you do this right, like if you successfully, make this place seem interesting and appealing enough, people will want to come. And if people do want to come, then it will be nice to them. It will be a generous thing to give them some sort of concrete, practical advice, which is absolutely true. And I was happy to do that. I do know some of the people who I recommend in the book. It's not just sort of out of nowhere, but the idea of it becoming a travel book was something that happened later. And I think at the core, it's not a travel book, because like you said, when people read travel books, they're looking for that practical information, and that's not the focus at all. It is there, and there is some stuff to help the traveler, but it wasn't the initial focus. And I do think, I hope that people will read it and want to come, but it's also not the easiest thing. I understand that. It's not Tokyo served by 2 international airports or whatever. So
did you pitch the book when it wasn't written yet to the publisher?
Yeah, I pitched it. I think I was about a quarter finished, maybe, I don't know, somewhere between a quarter and a half finished. I was at the point, so the introduction part with the history and the geography and those sorts of things was done. And then I had done several brewery tours and written them up. But it's hard to say that, like, how much of the book was done, because, to be perfectly honest, the really hard part was the introduction, like was the research stuff. It was the history and all of that. The brewery tours, writing those up was, it was like falling off a bicycle, because I would have a wonderful time and talk to people and meet them and just come home and I was just overflowing Like I really just wanted to talk about it. And so that just flies out. Scheduling the tours was another thing, because like the breweries are all over the place, and there's not the greatest traffic connection to some of them, and some of them are not particularly open to visitors. And so that was just a logistic challenge. But in terms of actually writing, the hardest part was already done when I pitched the book.
When you were trying to get in touch with breweries and arrange the meeting with them, so I know that some breweries just didn't reply, as I understand.
Yeah.
Some breweries were not very happy to. But in most cases, were they more happy to meet and talk about sake, or it took some efforts to get the most of them on board?
So almost all of them were very, very happy. There's one brewery that doesn't open to tours for, I think, very good practical reasons. I have been to every brewery in the book. Some of them a couple of them I went sort of as part of open days when they had public tours. One of the breweries that didn't really give me a tour it's just like it's there. There's a cafe where you can go and you can see the brewery. You can look in through the windows, that you watch people working while you're sipping coffee or whatever. And so the ones that I succeeded in getting into were all very easy to get into, except for one, Horie Sakaba, which took a little bit of it took a little bit of sort of an introduction from someone in the industry to get me in the door there. But almost all of them were more than happy to share with me, which was very exciting. I liked that. It's a good sign when people want to talk about their work like that.
Yeah, definitely. So you start the book with Dassai, and which is probably the most famous Yamaguchi sake brand in the world. And so did you do it on purpose? I wanted to grab readers' attention, say, "Oh yeah, Dassai, you know Dassai, here you are."
No, I didn't.
It was okay.
And, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It was an effective way to start the book. I did not start out thinking that. I actually wanted to avoid it. I didn't want to be like, all right, I know that everybody's going to be the only brewery that most people will have heard of is Dassai, Asahi Shuzo. And I didn't want to go for the easy road. There were all of these different, I kept thinking of how to arrange it. And, I started with a timeline, like from the oldest brewery to the newest, which, by the way, would have put Dassai at the very end because it is the newest brewery in Yamaguchi. And then I thought, okay, if we're going to be thinking about the connections, then it's got to be localized. It's got to be regional. You've got to cut it into the areas where they sort of go together. And so then I got the northwest, the northeast, south, and west arrangement. And then, okay, where do you start? If you look at a map, obviously the north is at the top. But then if the way Yamaguchi is arranged and the way Japan is arranged, if you come into Yamaguchi, most people are coming from Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, which means you start at the east and move west. So it just seems like a natural flow. You start in the east, which is where Dassai is. And then, all right, within that eastern section, let's just make it easy. Let's go alphabetical. So in every section is just in alphabetical order, and Asahi Shuzo starts with an A. So there you go. Yes, it is obviously the right commercial decision, but that was not what I was intending. And my publisher is probably very happy that I did that, but there you go.
I think it works very well because everybody knows Dassai.
Sure.
Well, if you're interested in sake, you know Dassai, and it grabs your attention, and then you keep reading. It worked very well.
I'm glad. So there you go. Happy accident.
So about Yamaguchi, and you mentioned terroir. a couple of times in the book, and there was a excellent podcast episode about of sake deep dive about terroir, and it's very debatable topic. And so is there, and also when you read through the book, very often the brewery said, oh, we want to use local rice, we want to use the rice from local field or local Yamaguchi rice.
Right.
So these kind of things. They use local water, and you mentioned several times some style Yamaguchi sake style, like traditional style of sake.
Yeah.
As well. So is there Yamaguchi terroir?
No.
Does it exist? What do you think?
No, there is no Yamaguchi terroir. There is, and people really, it's fun to debate and it's fun to sort of go back and forth and stuff, but no, there is no terroir in Yamaguchi. And so this idea of locality, of using local rice and obviously local water, like you can't get around really that for the most part. That's much more about just sort of valuing your community, because particularly in these non-famous sake brewing places, right, where there's still a lot of very small sake breweries all throughout Japan that are serving, they're making sake for their neighbors. Like, really, that's just what it is. It's the people around who are literally within physical distance within a very small very short physical distance of the brewery. And if you're making something for your neighbors, why not buy the stuff that you use to make it from your neighbors too? Right? I mean, there are, in many cases, the same people. You buy the rice from the farmer, then you make the sake, and then you sell the sake to the farmer. And it just seems to make sense. Some of the breweries are much more focused on it than others. Gokyo only uses, like, 100% of the rice that they use is grown in Yamaguchi. Yachio Shuzo, 100% of the rice that they use is grown in Hagi City. Right, that's much more sort of localized. And everyone has, to a greater or lesser extent, begun that shift towards as much local production as possible. Even Dassai uses a large percentage of Yamaguchi grown rice, and it's good optics, right? I mean, we have to admit that part of this is a business decision. It looks good to say, we are supporting our local community by buying local ingredients. Part of it is economic. You save a lot more money on sort of shipping and things. And, Yamaguchi rice doesn't have the kind of premium that Hyogo rice, like Yamada Nishiki Hyogo grown Yamada Nishiki does. So it's cheaper, mostly, not always. Some of it is more expensive. And some of it's just pride, right? They're proud to be from Yamaguchi. And so it's a mark of pride to be able to use the rice grown nearby. But in terms of like flavor, whether or not you use Yamaguchi grown rice or Hiroshima grown rice or Shimane grown rice or Hyogo grown rice, there's no clear meaning to that. There's nothing where anyone could clearly identify a flavor difference or an influence or anything like that. It's more emotional, and that's not without value, right? Our perceptions are very complex, and I would even posit that, yes, knowing that, just that the psychological and emotional influence of knowing the value that the brewer placed on where they got their ingredients may make you enjoy the sake more. You may think, hey, this tastes better because I know that the brewer was really careful and concerned about sourcing their ingredients. But I don't know. That's not the taste of the land, right? The goût de terroir. That's not what that is. It's the taste of love. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's something else, and that exists. And that's, I think, if you want to define terroir as that culture, then you are free to do so. And if you do so, then okay, sure. Yeah, there's a Yamaguchi terroir. People care about the location that they source their ingredients from. I don't know what that tastes like, but
Yeah.
sure.
Obviously, our emotions, they
Mm-hmm.
add to the taste as well.
Absolutely.
How we perceive certain taste. Even like drinking from one cup, the same sake will probably taste slightly different for you if you drink from another cup, because it visual picture will probably in your brain will add something to this taste.
Absolutely. And there's, yeah, I think there's the psychological element. I also think there's a physiological element. All of the things that influence our perceptions of flavor are almost uncountable. Like so many things, and absolutely the vessels that you drink from, the idea like, oh, my son gave me this really really small cheap ochoko, and I just like I love drinking from it, and
Yeah.
it's like a mass produced little thing, but my son gave it to me, so it's a wonderful thing to use, and that emotional aspect is absolutely real. I wouldn't call that the terroir of my son, though. It's just it's just the way things are. Things influence our perceptions, and yeah.
It's a really interesting topic, terroir. Probably we can talk about it for
it's an infinite
hours.
topic. No one will ever agree on anything, and I think that's probably
exactly.
why people love it so much. They just get to talk and talk and talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. So another thing that struck me when I was reading the book, which I didn't think of, to be honest, how commercial the breweries are, how they think about marketing, they think about how to sell their sake better, how to serve their customers. Because when you think about sake industry, you've got this picture of very traditional industry. They make sake, they sell sake, but here you've got so many brands. You talk about they coming up with new brands like Tenbi or Miyoshi, and they think about what they want to express with these brands. It's quite interesting. I didn't think about it. Obviously, it was quite obvious if you think about sake brewery and see the labels, brand. But only after reading your book, I sort of realized that.
Yeah, I think one of the things about that is there is I think a growing generational divide, which is actually, it's a good thing, because the ones in particular that you just mentioned are really quite young, right? The people who are making that sake and who are planning that sake are much younger than, say, people who make, Gokyo or Takarabune or whatever. And they have a much more, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, marketing maybe isn't even a precise enough word. Like, they have a very distinct sensibility about how they want to present their sake, and it's very very modern. Even compared to, say, something like Toyo Bijin, Toyo Bijin has a very clear brand and marketing strategy, but even that is not, like, I just wouldn't put it in the same brand, like in the same realm as Tembi or Omine. Goodness gracious, Omine's branding is just amazingly spot on. It is a very interesting thing that I think is relatively recent. Yeah, because obviously people have long had brand ideas about branding, but this really super modern stylistic approach to labeling and description and sales approaches, it's all really interesting to see that difference, because there are still breweries that don't have that. Kinfundo Shuzo does not have any kind of branding strategy. They just, they're that traditional thing that you just mentioned. Like, they make sake and then sell it to the old guy on the corner.
Yeah.
And that does still exist.
Yeah, because what is interesting about this branding, this marketing, it's not superficial.
Right.
It's very much coming from actual sake,
Right.
actual what they do. It's not like, oh, let's call it that and try to sell it to these kind of consumers.
Right.
No.
It's a different sake.
Yeah.
I don't know. You probably haven't had Tembe yet. I don't know. Like they're just starting to export. They've only been brewing for 2 years now. Like they're just starting to export. But it is absolutely just down to the very core, super modern. It's just a really fresh, original kind of sake that, the branding and everything just fits together down to the flavor, down to the design of the brewery. They have if anyone ever does come to Yamaguchi, I highly recommend trying to get to Choshu Shuzo, because they've made a 2-story sake brewery, and the second story is all for visitors. Like there's a little library there. They've got like a video presentation about how they make their sake. They have QR codes so that you can scan them with your phone that will show videos of how they use the equipment that you're looking at. It's super modern, super fresh, very unique. And it's also unfortunately in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know how many people will make it out there, but yeah, top to bottom, they're on the cutting edge, I think.
Okay. Yeah. It's amazing. Okay. So another thing you've got in your book, you've got these nice sections called connections. When you talk about, as I understand, the, I don't know, like a fundamental things about,
the peripheral things, maybe.
Yeah. So how did you come up with this idea, and how you arrange them? Because I can see, like, for example, Iwakuni, it's got about rice. Then Shunan, you've got about sake shops and bars. Is it just randomly, or it has some connection with these particular areas, or I don't know?
Well, so I don't want to say random. So, like, say you mentioned Iwakuni and rice. Right. I could go on to like the history of Iwakuni. The basin around there is where one of the places where rice growing first flourished in Yamaguchi. But to be perfectly honest, there is a farmer who lives very close to me. His name is Fukumoto Takuo, and he grows organic rice for lots of sake breweries, including those in Iwakuni. And when I was trying to decide how to arrange those connection sections, it felt like there had to be some sort of deeper connection than just random. And Fukumoto-san is just a really important figure, and the most of the breweries that he sells to are in Iwakuni. So I thought, okay, right, it goes there. Right, he sells to Gokyo, he sells to Kinsuzume, he sells to Dassai, he sells to Gangi. So yeah, it just made sense. And then as for the sort of Shunan being the bars and restaurants, I drink there. That's where I go to drink. Okay. So yeah, that's very, very personal. Hagi obviously is pottery.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's just sort of the locations, like, and so yeah, basically just for me, it's very personal. And at the same time, I could find within that personal connection something a bit more universal to say about the industry. So I definitely I don't want to deny that. Yeah, I mean, some of it's just what I wanted to do. Like, it's just me. I thought, hey, I really want to talk about my friend's sake shop. But it also does, in fact, reflect a lot on the local sake industry and how it runs and what people do. So I don't think I cheated.
No. Yeah, I think it gives obviously a lot of perspective. You look at the sake industry, look at the sake breweries as a part of a bigger picture. So it's not just sake brewery, but obviously you understand, okay, they depend on the farmers depend on them. There is a obviously distribution, how they're trying to sell their sake, and there is some roots like the Barocco, and obviously sake is very much food drink. You
Right.
usually drink it with food, especially in Japan, and then how you drink it is from hagi pottery and ceramic. Yeah, so it's a very well done again. So you at the end of the book, you've got very like a 3D picture, if you like, of Yamaguchi Sake rather than just a list of the breweries and when they opened as a extreme from the other side.
Yeah, I'm glad that comes through, and I'm glad sort of that I succeeded in doing what I wanted to do by sort of presenting that picture. I wanted to give as deep a picture as I could, and I guess I do have to sort of worry about how it's changing, because it's taken so long, and over the past couple of years some of the stuff has changed. Like one of the bars that I wrote about is closed, and people have changed jobs, and I forgot to put, I guess I forgot to put in a disclaimer about that. But yes, it was as factual and up to date as I could make it at the time of writing, but it's been some time since then, and things have changed probably. But yeah, it is an attempt to present as complete a picture as I could. I didn't write much about drinkers, I guess, the people who drink sake, but
Yeah,
it's me
probably, but it's you. Because you come across sometimes in the book, so
it's
there
hard.
is some kind of info about yourself. Okay, before we continue our conversation about Yamaguchi Sake and Jim's excellent book, let me remind you about London Sake, our sponsor, and their huge selection of curated sake sets, which provide a great opportunity to explore various styles and types of sake. Have a look, but don't forget about the magic word Sugidama, all caps, to get your 10% discount. So the people of the sake, it's probably very big focus of the book, and it's quite amazing because you met brewers, met brewery owners, salespeople, ceramic artists, and you talk to them. And for me, it was quite interesting because you can see that people, what they think. A lot of times they mention that they value, for example, quality over quantity, or they care for the environment, local environment, and the environment in general, or they very much focus on community, things like that. So it's and for me it was probably one of the very interesting part of the book, reading about actual people who make this sake, and obviously some stories for me were stood out, like for example Fumika-san from Shintani Shuzo, when she was saying, "Oh, I gave it 3 years to try as a toji," and you can sort of imagine what she was going through in the sake industry, which still quite male dominated and still very traditional, and she put herself forward and became, I guess, very vulnerable, because a lot of people may say, "Oh yeah, the sake she's making is not good," and things like that. And I think you managed to convey this vulnerability of her when she was trying to do that. And then obviously there were some other problems with the breweries, which is quite hot, breaking. But altogether, it makes it's amazing story. And it's amazing story, but it's only 2 pages. And you think, oh God, you managed to put in 2 pages just so much. Yeah, it's a, or for example, the Okazaki-san, who was saying that no, I don't want to increase the production because how can I control the quality if I increase it? I'm pretty happy with this amount of production because I know that I make the sake I really want to make. So it's quite amazing. It's a lot of such stories. So for you, did you have like any, who made these probably the strongest impression on you in any way, or whose stories probably resonated most with you?
I mean, it's hard not to feel something from Shintani-san's story. I mean, it was just such a like it's almost like a made for TV kind of thing. Like, it's so many hardships and so many things in such a short amount of time, and so much success came out of the end of it. I also feel really, I feel very close to Yaoshin Shuzo Gangi. The for years, the Kuramoto Toji, Kobayashi-san, Hisashige Kobayashi-san, was he was doing just really really great stuff, and a very very small scale, and like insisting on all of these very small points that all together created just a really interesting and unique way of brewing that yeah, I'm glad to see, like, they've been successful and they have done that stuff. It's just, you know I've seen so many of these very small breweries who it's a very common story that they very nearly close, or they did close. They had to convert production to something that they didn't want to make or whatever, just to survive. And all of them have come back. Hatsumomoji Shuzo, Hatsumomoji, now they've taken the Shuzo off their name, that makes Harada. They stopped brewing for 20 years, and one man, like on his own, just got it started again. The same for Abuno Shuzo. Abuno Tsuru Shuzo. He reopened his sake brewery alone, but then by saying that, I'm saying like, oh, he did it alone. That's not actually the story, though, right? The story is that he came back to try to do that, and then the people around him, the other people in the industry, supported that. They helped that. They both sort of emotionally and materially, and so those stories are also really, really, I just think, wonderful, because it illustrates something that, yeah, these are competing businesses to a certain extent, but they are also, I guess, standard bearers for an industry that all of them want to see succeed. All of them want to see grow and prosper, and so they help each other when things get down to it. They do step up to help out, and yeah, that kind of thing just really really makes me happy to hear about.
Yeah, because it's definitely a very strong sense of community that comes from the book, and you can feel it. Because I don't remember the brewery, but they come to, when they do some work, people just around the brewery come to help. And
yeah, there's actually a couple. I think Kinfundo Shuzo does that. And let's see, Abuno Tsuru has neighborhood people who come help out. Yeah, and yeah, it is really a gratifying thing to see, where they have just neighborhood folks, like, oh, you're brewing here, let me carry some boxes for you or whatever. That, yeah.
Another quite common topic in the book, and when you read about breweries, is when it's like traditional brewery, the toji or kuramoto, they making sake for many years, and their children sometimes not that interested in that. They going to Tokyo, they go to Tokyo, or Kyoto or Osaka. They having completely different life and interest, and then suddenly their parents say, "Oh, we can't go on with the brewery, we're too old and we want to retire. And they come back.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they very quickly they come up with they learn these things and come up with amazing sake, which is wins some kind of awards, which is it's quite interesting how it works, and how people trading their life in big city for coming back to Yamaguchi, which is very rural and probably quite slow life, and this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it is. To me, there are a couple of elements to that. Like, obviously, there's the family element. People have. I think as they get older, they start to value their roots a bit more. And I think there's also a little bit of. I think people do go to Tokyo or whatever and get a little burnout sometimes, and so maybe there is an element of it. They just realize maybe that life back home was better. But then I think there is also a sense that because Yamaguchi is seeing a lot of success in sake brewing, those people maybe come to realize that it could actually work out if they come home. It's not the idea that it's just the same old family business where we don't there's no future. It's just the same thing all the time. That maybe there is in fact some opportunity for it to be more than maybe it was for their parents' generation. And I think that probably one of the stories that you're thinking about is Yachio Shuzo, which is like that's exactly what happened. And then she came back and became
she was
this really
talking to her friends, right? And
right. They were like,
no,
it would just be really sad, if another sake brewery closed down, right? And she came home and she had no idea how to make sake, and the people around her helped her. So Takafumi Sumikawa Shuzojo helped her, and she had staff, and then she made some really really great sake.
Yeah,
and I think that. Nobody makes any decision based on one factor alone, but I definitely think that just the idea of sake brewing in Yamaguchi is a bit more optimistic now than it would have been 20 years ago. And I think that probably has something to do with some of these stories.
Yeah, because it's play very well. It plays very well with this tradition versus innovation sort of narrative. Because sake brewing industry is very traditional, but it's so innovative. So it's amazing. It's quite amazing that they do both at the same time. Which
yeah. I think it's a place like if your company structure has room to play around, I really think that it's a great thing for people to innovate and be able to experiment. There are some places that are a little bit locked in. They have a very very vocal, strong customer base that doesn't like a lot of playing around. But it is still an industry that has room to grow and develop without losing its core, which I think is an exciting place to play.
Yeah. So when you met this quite a lot of people, did you have any kind of interesting, funny, revealing, or probably embarrassing moments? Some kind of spice.
A little bit of spice. I'm gonna have to go back a little bit. I'm just looking. It's funny because a lot of these places, are people that I've known for a while, and some of them were people that I was meeting for the first time. And when I'm meeting someone for the first time, it's really hard for me to talk, which is not a good thing to do, or it's not a good thing to sort of struggle with when you're trying to interview people.
Yeah.
I will say that let's see, spicy. What was spicy? Takeuchi Shuzojo was an interesting thing that happened. Um, it's this tiny little brewery that like literally was only available within the town where it was brewing, a place called Hofu. When I went there, they were actually they were sort of taking a year off because it was one of those sort of more difficult stories because the father had been the brewer and the owner and had passed away, and there was no one to really take over. And then the two sons moved back, and they were in the process of getting things restarted, and really struggling. And like it is one of just the most how do I say it, tumble down kind of facilities I've ever seen. Like it was just, it was like lots of really, really old tanks that hadn't been used in decades. And, their fune was broken and stuff. And like, it was really in a situation where I was kind of shocked that they were still in business. Like I thought maybe they're getting ready to close, but instead that they've only grown. They've started expanding sales outside of the prefecture now. They've introduced new equipment, and their sake is just really delicious. I love it, and I was really worried in that first instance. Like in that very first meeting, I was like, "Oh man, I'm coming here to introduce this brewery, and by the time the book comes out, they're probably going to be closed." And I was wrong. Like they proved me wrong, and so that was an exciting development. I'm really happy because they make the kind of sake that I love, which is this unpretentious, really richly flavored, really savory kind of futsushu and genshu and the old fashioned stuff.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, you've got toji recommendations after each brewery section, and apart from a couple of times or 3 times, I don't remember when toji didn't recommend or you didn't meet them. I was wondering how did you decide to do this way? Because sometimes people say, okay, I'm going to this brewery, I know there's like I would recommend. And you decided to give the brewery chance to recommend what they think is they probably the most the best sake or the most representative. How did you decide that?
To be perfectly honest, I was really just curious what they would say. I didn't give them any conditions. I didn't say, this is the kind of sake, like you should choose something that, expresses or whatever. You should choose your favorite sake, or what sake do you drink? It's like, no, what sake do you want the readers to know about is what I asked them. What sake is for them? And, I put it in the book usually, like, sometimes they would answer like that. Like they would just have it on the tip of their tongues. And sometimes they really had to think about it. Sometimes they're just like, I don't know. What do you think? And what I found is that more times than not, the sake that they recommended was what I would have called their sort of archetypal sake. Like it was the one that really seemed to define them, in my opinion. I'm not saying that that's what they would say, but like when they present this, like, this is actually this brewery in a bottle. It's their ideas, it's their hard work, it's the image that they want to present to the world. It's very interesting to me. Like Gokyo, the toji recommended their Kyoke Kimoto Junmai. And that was one of the ones where it was literally instantaneous. Like it was literally like, oh yeah, it's the best sake we make. And the toji said, this is the one I drink and love. And when you think about it, like this idea, like it's this unpretentious sake made in this really traditional way that it's made in wooden tanks that is a thing that almost died, and Gokyo is working hard to represent, and they're not doing it like it's not something that they trumpet from the rooftops. It's not something like, hey, look at what we do. Like they just wanted to do it, and they just did it without any fanfare. And I think that really does sum up Gokyo in a nutshell. Like that's the kind of brewery that they are. And so it was really interesting to me to see how they chose and what they chose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting take, because very often, I think more often than not, you see authors' recommendations rather than the breweries. But it makes it very interesting what they think about their sake.
I really did not want this book to be about me. I really did not, and people ask me, it's like, is this going to be your memoir? Is this going to be your sake story? It's like, no, it's not. It's not about me. And obviously it is partly about me, because I did, choose the topic, and I do love Yamaguchi and its sake, and it's not unconnected to me, but, I want this to be about the breweries and their sake. So, yeah, that was a very, a very conscious choice. I did not want to recommend a sake myself for each of those.
So it's a nice segue into what the main points about Yamaguchi Sake you wanted to convey to your readers. You touched upon it at the beginning, you talked about now, but anything else?
I want people to see how diverse it is. I want people to get a sense of just how broad the spectrum is. And particularly just keeping in mind, like there are only 23 working sake breweries in Yamaguchi, and none of them are at all alike. Like they're just completely different. You cannot by any means mistake one for another. And that's just in 23. So if you think about, all of the hundreds of sake breweries across Japan, like just the enormous amount of variety there has to be. Like it's not just one thing. It's so many different things. And like I really want that to come through. Like, every single brewery has its stories, even the really huge ones. They have a history, they have a philosophy or an ideal. And, whether you like it or not, whether it sort of resonates with you or not, it is a valid and genuine story. So yeah, I think I hope people get a sense of just how wide the variety of Yamaguchi sake is.
Yeah, I think definitely people will, because when I was reading the book, it was this sake, these breweries completely different, and you're quite amazed by this kind of diversity and how they make sake, what do they think about it, and I absolutely agree with that. So have you made any discoveries while you were writing this book? Something that you didn't know before, or something that you just realized only when you were writing the book?
Oh, everything. Like every page has a great discovery. I mean, like say for example, it never really. It's one of those things where you would know it, but it didn't really hit home. Like the idea that Yaoshin Shuzo or Gangi and Gokyo are like you could almost throw a baseball from one to the other. Like they're across this relatively minor river from each other. It's like a 5-minute walk across a bridge, if that. And the sake is completely different, of course. Or let's see, what else did I what like it really was just everything. Like how far, if we keep talking about Iwakuni, right? There are 5 sake breweries in Iwakuni, but 2 of them are like a 40-minute drive from the city center. So and they're in these beautiful mountain towns that that have absolutely no connection to the rest of the area, or the fact that Sumikawa Shuzojo is practically in Shimane. You know, I guess the geographical relationships are things that really come home to you when you're driving for 3 hours to get to a place.
Yeah.
And then obviously, all of the people's stories were so different. So, getting to know people a bit better was always the most enjoyable part of the work.
Yeah. So what do you think about the future of Yamaguchi Sake? Does it look bright, or?
I think it does look bright. I think it looks, obviously COVID was a big blow. And so Yamaguchi Sake in particular was vulnerable to it because all of the breweries sort of as a, I don't know, they're not working together, but they have a shared philosophy of embracing export. Obviously, it goes without saying that Dassai is far and away the biggest of them, but they're very outward oriented. And when COVID hit, that shut everything down. Like, they had terrible problems with that, but they were also really quick to recover. Where even when Japan was restricting restaurants and bars and stuff, they were able to sell overseas. And so I think they're still doing that. And I think that embrace of international markets is probably going to help keep them growing. Like I think I pointed out, one of the things that made this whole story really interesting was how Yamaguchi came from near dead last in sake sales to grow to almost 7th in the country, and it was the only prefecture in Japan that grew every single year for well over a decade, up until like 2020, obviously, when that happened. And I think that pattern is going to pick up again. I think it is bright. I think we have. I would like to see more of the sake breweries that have closed reopen. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think it's probably possible. I've met some people who say that they are working on that. It's obviously a huge undertaking to reopen a sake brewery once it is closed. Just sort of the money required. But I think the future is still bright.
Yeah, it's great to hear, because obviously it's a lot of stories about the sake industry declining and things like that. But it's very nice to hear that it doesn't look as bad as sometimes it sounds.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about the sake industry as a whole, like, yes, it is declining, and at a certain point, you just kind of have to think, well, it kind of had to, because right around its peak, it was this entire huge baby boom generation that was drinking sake every single night. Like, that's gonna be hard to recover. You're not going to get back to that point. But I think so. With some forward thinking and outward looking perspectives, there is room to grow, and I think Yamaguchi is probably on that path.
Yeah. So, for example, if somebody wants to, after reading your book, wants to visit Yamaguchi,
sure,
and obviously, if people coming from abroad, they don't have, much time to visit all breweries or all places. So, what would your recommendations if somebody wants to come for a few days and to have some kind of taste of Yamaguchi?
I would recommend choosing by region, right? And when I say by region, like, I did sort of have a bit of a reason for, arranging things by the east, west, north, south kind of orientation. Iwakuni in the east, it does have an airport with connections to Tokyo. And there are 3 sake breweries in the town center. There are facilities, there are restaurants, and of course, there's even a tourist facility that has tastings for all of the local sake in Iwakuni. So I think, that's a really good way to focus. If you come by Shinkansen, if you go to Tokuyama, Hatsumomoji is literally a 5-minute walk from the Shinkansen station. It's a wonderful place. And then, some of the tourist facilities also have tastings of the 3 local sake breweries in that area. If you go to Hagi, there are, in the book I mentioned a place called Sakaya that has things, but if you're walking around near the Hagi city center where you've got the old castle grounds, there's a sake brewery right there. It's literally on a shopping arcade. So you can, you're walking along a shopping arcade, you can step into the sales shop and maybe you run into the sake brewer. I run into him almost every time I go there. He seems to be in the shop a lot. So there you go. So I would say, just choose a location that seems to have some of the sake breweries you would like to visit. One of the truly unfortunate things is the public transportation connections aren't that great. Obviously, if you're visiting sake breweries, you want to drink some sake, so driving can be a little bit tricky. But yeah, I'll be perfectly honest. I am hoping to get some kind of voice at the local prefectural government tourist board, so that they will actually look at me and listen, and I will say to them, just set up sake tours, set up buses, help people get there, because people do want to go there. So yeah. But I mean, Iwakuni and the Tokuyama area are both really relatively accessible, and they have sake breweries that are walkable. Some of the sake breweries that people really want to go to, like Taka, are just hard. Taka is really far from any kind of transportation, unfortunately. Abunotsuru and Sumikawa Shuzojo are also really hard to reach. So yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah, but the great thing about the book that you provide some info, the very practical info. If you, for example, need to arrange the tour of the brewery, or you can just turn up and say, I would like to see a brewery, which is very useful, because when you're planning your trip, you think, oh yeah, should I call them? Should I get in touch, or can I just come and see the brewery? And you've got a very useful visiting Yamaguchi section when you talk about how to get around Yamaguchi and what other places of interest, not only for sake lovers, but some historical places. And you talk about them during in all breweries sections, which is very, very interesting and nice, because obviously if you're coming to see the brewery, you want to, you probably spend some time there, but you want to get a feel of the local area. So yeah, it's a great thing.
Yeah, and it is, I think, important to help contextualize the breweries as well, because they are connected to the history, they are connected to the sightseeing spots. It's not out of nowhere that these breweries are there. They have those same connections, and I hope that people do recognize that. But yeah, do come and visit. There is stuff to see and do, and lots of things to taste in Yamaguchi.
Yeah, it looks like it's a great prefecture, a great place to see, which is very different from usual destinations.
It's very much off the beaten track. There's no crowds in Yamaguchi. There's no, you don't have to fight for subway seats. Nope.
Yeah. So, any plans for other books, other projects?
I wouldn't say plans at this point. I have vague ideas about doing a book about pottery. I don't feel another sake book in me at this point. Nobody knows. I could have just a complete change of mind about that at any point. But at this point, no, I don't see another sake book on the horizon. But pottery.
But you will continue sake deep dive, right?
Oh yeah, that's the plan. We've our next episode is recorded and coming in. Yeah, we're continuing for the foreseeable future. Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, sounds great. Anything you want to tell our listeners, apart from what you already done?
I just want people to. I think one of the things that I really want people to keep in mind is that when people talk about sake regions, that region was defined by someone. Right? It's not a natural thing. There are reasons behind it beyond just nature, and so Yamaguchi has not so far been called a sake region because no one called it a sake region. So now I am. I want people to know Yamaguchi is a sake region because I say it is, and it's a sake region worth exploring because there's a lot of people here making some really, really good sake. Yeah, I think probably that's that's the message.
Yeah.
That I want.
Okay.
Right.
So at the end of each episode, I
Sure.
ask my guests to recommend some sake for our listeners. I understand that Yamaguchi sake is probably hard to get outside Yamaguchi, outside Japan, and it's apart from Dassai, which is probably everywhere.
There are some brands I think that are easier to get than others, and but my problem is I don't know, like the UK and the European market are not particularly familiar.
Yeah,
But
so you can recommend anything.
I can recommend anything. Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Then see, and I always worry. Like another reason that I didn't put my own recommendations is because I didn't want to make anybody mad in the book. Like I didn't want to be like, hey, why'd you choose that sake and not ours or whatever. I don't. That's nothing that I wanted to hear. But here's what I will say. If you ever get the chance to get Kinsuzume Yamahai Junmai Ginjo from Horie Sakaba, do not hesitate. Buy that sake because it's mind blowing. I don't know what they do there. They wouldn't show me. They wouldn't tell me like all of the little details. But the sake that they make is really something special. So if you ever get the chance, Kinsuzume. If you're really really rich, you could try Mujaku, which is it's like $1,000 a bottle or something. But yeah, the Yamahai is not that expensive.
Okay. Yeah, it's a nice recommendation. It's something that people can put on the bucket list. Like, what 20 things to do before you retire and or after you retire, and to buy a bottle of particular sake.
Kinsuzume. Kinsuzume means golden sparrow.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds very romantic and very sort of, very historic. I think it's like Golden Sparrow. You can imagine the historic book about Japan, Golden Sparrow and the Castle of Doom. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds pretty, very book title-ish.
Yeah, the Golden Sparrow, sure.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jim, for this conversation. It's an amazing book. I recommend it everyone.
Thank you so much.
And definitely worth reading it. Even if you are not going to Yamaguchi anytime soon, it's still fascinating read, and you will read about things, about people, about behind sake you like, or basically about Yamaguchi, about history of Japan, about Meiji restoration a bit. Yeah, it's a lot of very interesting facts in the book, which you don't realize before you read it. Yeah, and it's very well written. It's amazingly written. Thanks a lot, Jim. Yeah,
I appreciate it, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That's it for today. I'll be back with more interviews about various sake breweries and sake around the world, as well as one special episode. In the meantime, if you would like to know more about Yamaguchi Sake, the people who brew it, the prefecture, and many other cool things, order James Ryan's Discovering Yamaguchi Sake book. It's been published. Hurry up. I personally enjoyed reading it, and that's why I'm so excited about recommending the book. Also, if you can, buy some Yamaguchi Sake. Dassai is the brand which is easiest to find. It's, for example, available from our sponsor London Sake website. Other Yamaguchi Sake brands are harder to find, especially here in the UK. But if you see one, especially Kinsuzume Yamahai, recommended by Jim, just grab it. And if you are still unsure what sake to buy, look up the tasting notes section on my website, sugidama.co.uk. Another thing, I'm thinking about the final episode of the season. I was going to do it about the IWC sake this year, but I do not judge this time. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, please let me know. I always enjoy reading your comments and emails. Just drop me a line. My email address is alex@sugidama.co.uk, or you can tag me on Instagram at sugidamablog in one word, or on Mastodon at sugidamablog@universeodon.com. Again, if you like the episode and want more, hit the subscribe button, and you will get every new episode downloaded to your player as soon as it's out. If you would like to give me a bit of support, please leave a review or rate Sugidama Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, Podchaser, or anywhere you can do it. But more importantly, please share this podcast with your friends, on your social media, chat apps, anywhere. Recommend it to any stranger. If you see anyone interested remotely in sake, Japan, just let them know that there is a great podcast about Japanese sake. The more new people start listening to Sugidama Podcast, the more actively the podcast platforms start recommending it to other listeners. So, it's the best way to bring new people to the world of sake and support Sugidama Podcast. Thanks a lot for listening. Kampai!
Suge, 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 Sugidama blog. Suge, 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 Sugidama blog.